Hello, and welcome back to Wired for Change, where we explore the ideas, people, and technologies reshaping our world. I'm Amy Yee. Today, we're joined by someone who is not only at the forefront of cybersecurity threat intelligence, but someone who is also a passionate bridge builder in our community. Cheryl Biswas is someone who's worked at organizations like TD Bank and KPMG, and she is such an expert in what she does. She has been tracking and monitoring cybersecurity threat intelligence for quite some time, from criminal groups to nation state actors and threats. She has been deeply engaged in OT, ICS, and critical infrastructure protection. She also helps with simulations for students across Canada in this area. She is a founding member of the Diana Initiative, championing women and diversity in cybersecurity. We are going to have a look at her journey today and at some of her insights with respect to protecting critical infrastructure, as well as how she sees the role of diversity and community in building resilience. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. And I am delighted to be here. I'm especially considering the great guests you've had on so far and just the opportunity to have a really good conversation.
And Cheryl, I appreciate that in our pre-chat, you had let me know that, as a researcher, you had actually researched the podcast and looked at how it had evolved. And you know the podcast, I think, better than I do at this point. So I had a good laugh at that. So thank you for doing the research. Yes. I appreciate it. I love that. And so maybe for those of us who don't spend all our time in threat intelligence, you can just explain, what is cyber threat intelligence? And, it sounds like a good thing, and maybe why we don't have more of it.
Well, it is gathering, collecting information from a variety of sources about activities and threats, vulnerabilities, the parties behind them, and bringing that together, then analyzing it within the context of risk and potential impact to your organization, because what really matters is this relevant to you? And doing this in a timely manner, because bringing this to somebody 3 days after an event when it's blown over is not going to be valuable. But having an ear to the ground and tracking things so that you can be ready to jump when you know that the fire has started, that's everything. And not everybody is burned by the same fires. So it's really important. We have to learn to be discerning about what we prioritize and call attention to, while at the same time, for me in particular, this is so important, looking at everything. I'm a big picture view person, and I love to connect the dots, and that is crucial. So we'll talk more about that, I know.
And that's something that we bonded over as well, that idea of connecting the dots. So I love that you brought that into the conversation early, Cheryl. And so what drew you into cybersecurity and into the threat intelligence, specifically?
Oh, well, my journey was long and winding road, as they say. I had started back to work after being away for 10 years, doing the mom thing. And I started as a girl Friday at a little managed security provider, and because I really liked the guys in the basement, and I love the sound of servers in the morning. So.
The sound of servers in the morning. I'm gonna have to try that out. I love it.
Yes, that is my inner geek. So I will give you all of the emails, etc. My university degree is in political science. And when I first stumbled across that, I was going to do a writing course, but instead it was like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. And that just bit. And I never got to do anything really with it, but opening up the emails, I found the Kaspersky newsletter, and I'm like reading the topics. And one day it was talking about Stuxnet. And I'm like, oh, that was the huge aha moment. And like, where has this been all my life? This is a thing I want to do. So I just absorbed everything from that moment that I could, read, looked at it. And when my company handed me the Twitter account of 0 followers and said, please, I took that over. I didn't really do anything on Twitter. I just thought it was, one of those things other people do. And I discovered this rabbit hole of learning. I connected to a few security firms that I had seen, and there was like a wealth, this incredible, never ending maze of information. And there were people who wanted to talk to each other, people who wanted to talk to me and who would answer my questions, me. And I just was thrilled. I made some great contacts early on, and I will forever be grateful to them because they welcomed me in. I didn't have their credentials. I was just learning. And they invited me to join them at a HackerCon in Indianapolis, of all places. So I went down there and I discovered the true meaning of hacker family and what it meant to be with your people and acceptance, and an explosion of learning and seeing what diversity can do, what neurodiversity can do, all of it. And that I just took that home with me, and I've never stopped. So that brought me in. But Stuxnet was the thing that hit the hardest. It was the realization about critical infrastructure and politics. It's that fabulous intersection of geopol and tech. So what I think I told you this. I'm that weirdo who loves watching disaster movies and what we can learn from them so we can prepare. And I swear, one day I'm going to do a talk on that.
I bet you would write an amazing disaster movie. You should actually create one or help to write like a script or a screenplay for one. That would be cool. What a great learning tool, though, right? It just occurred to me. Sure. Wow. My mind is racing now.
We can collaborate.
Let's do a collaboration. That'd be awesome. Okay, so I was wondering if you could go back with Stuxnet and that intersection of politics and technology and threats kind of thing, right? So could you give us just a bit of an example like of how that plays out, maybe from Stuxnet or from something else?
Which is the whole concept of, you have a country like Iran, which is, you see it as the threat. They are like a swarm of hornets. They will strike fast and they will strike hard when provoked. They wanted nuclear capability. They were not supposed to have it, but they were willing to do anything to get it. And as we've learned, the US and Mossad, Israel, partnered together to stop them, ideally through physical destruction. So it is not just like a malware or an inconvenience or disruption. This is destruction at scale. And it is coordinated by state-sponsored groups. This is the government in potentially likely covert operations. And again, my love of these kinds of movies was just pinging, because this happens, but most people blissfully go on unaware of it. And I wanted to know everything because there was more here, and maybe there was a way I can do something, be involved as a defender. It was just instinctive reaction. So looking at the attack itself and realizing how fascinating it was, I'm just going to bring something over 1 second. If you do not have this book, oh, this is a great, great book. I have joked in past that I read this as a good night story. But honestly, Kim Zetter tells a fantastic story of how this unfolded through the people who came across something, and this is the fascination for me and anybody, I think, in this industry, they found something and they said, what is this and why? Curiosity. Curiosity is key to the things that we do. And if you ask that question and you pull that thread, which they do, they did some reverse engineering on why was this piece of code in this thing and what did it lead to? Ultimately realizing a complex coordination of wrappers and subterfuge and being able to hide a weapon, a coded weapon with a specific purpose to go in stealthily, ultra stealthily, breach an environment that should never have been breached, and destroy something that had the potential to harm civilization. Now, at that level, that's an act of war if it is caught outright. How do you get something into an air-capped facility where in Iran it was this very secret facility that had centrifuges to be able to process the uranium into a weapons grade material so that they could actually do what they wanted with it. And the malware that was specially wrapped and put on a USB key, carried in and inserted into a device that was never supposed to happen, enabled the centrifuges to spin at an alarming rate without initially being detected and break. There was a lot of broken centrifuges. So that set them back considerably. And with that knowledge, they had unleashed a genie in the bottle, because now all the other nation states were looking at this, realizing, oh, if they can do that, we could do that. And so it begins.
Wow. And then, so let us inside your mind a little bit. When you say, you're looking at everything, right? And I mean, I imagine you look at everything you can using all the tools that you have at your disposal, and then certain things just kind of pique your interest, and then you kind of dive into those. Like, how does that work for you? Just a glimpse.
You can see in back of me, I have like a whiteboard with a bunch of sticky notes. So I just capture things as I come across them and throw them up there so that I can literally draw connections between things. But I have at least 2,000 notes from my iPhone because I literally link to things because I have a problem. I'm always online looking and reading things. So wherever I can find a good collection of open source information or people talking about things, I ping it, I save it, I put it away. And that enables me to get those data points. I am not as technical as I'm going to be, and as a lot of other people are, where they're actually hunting the indicators of compromise and tracing things online. That's going to come. I have some time on my hands now to really develop that. But I rely on the people who do this work, and I am so respectful and so grateful to them. So they make it possible for somebody like me to take that technical information, those details, and run with it. Look at a bigger picture. Think in terms of, okay, historical context. Where have we seen this before? And history repeats. So we probably have seen this before. What happened as a result of that? How is that different to now? What were the consequences then? What maybe did they learn as the attackers, or did we learn as the targets? And how can we apply that to now? And those are the questions for me that I always try to work from. I learned some interesting things like in history repeats. We're really bad at the lessons learned part. We may have learned, did we learn the lesson, but did we apply the lesson? The lesson is great, but not so much if you didn't apply it. And we lose track of that because the next shiny thing happens and on it goes. So I feel like I'm that person who stays in the room after everybody's left, and I lift up the rug and then I see what's still there. And it's those little trinkets that come back and I go, I literally probably have a page called Things That Make Me Go, where I can jot down some of these ideas, because it won't happen today. It won't happen a month from now, but very likely a month, no, 12 months down the line, we're going to see this. And people are going, how did that happen? Or what is that? And I'm like, do you remember this thing? And a lot more people say, do you remember when I told you? Or I told you so. This happens.
That's so interesting, because it sounds to me like you bring meaning to the data, and you bring meaning not just in the moment, but also after it happens. And what is the meaning of that past event and the relevance to what we're looking at right now? And that's so important because, for many reasons, but the one that strikes me right now is a lot of, bias that we introduce to information as humans, like a recency bias, for example. So, well, this happened, recently, it must, must either be there or it can't happen again because it just happened. So we just had that. We ascribe all kinds of, false meanings or implications to data that, aren't real or don't exist. So it sounds like you help, people and organizations and decision makers to get past some of those biases, and to, to take the right actions where possible.
It's always important to meet your audience, the recipient of your knowledge, where they are, and find the way to communicate with them. How do they talk? What are they going to hear? And then be able to put it in front of them, as opposed to just shoving it forward. Not everybody is going to be receptive. Many people are not technical. I certainly wasn't technical, but I was a geek, so that definitely helped. But I'm self-taught. I've taught myself what I know about computers, etc. So I really get what it means to talk to somebody just at that ground floor level and make it accessible to them and tell a story. Everybody can get engaged with a story. But that relevance, why does this matter to you? It's that so what? And it's really challenging to actually appreciate so what. It took me some time to be able to really get there, and I'm still working on that.
A lot of organizations are working on this, I think. I liked your point earlier about, not being, terrific at learning, the lessons, and that applies to a lot of different, areas. Where have you seen that kind of done well? Like just in terms of an example where, you applied a technique or a process that allowed sort of better learning of the lessons. Yes, where you've applied it, or where you've seen it kind of done where it was more successful to ensure that you were learning from the lessons, where organizations were learning from past lessons or past knowledge was helpful to inform future actions.
Managed file transfer systems. There was a series of attacks by ransomware groups leveraging significant vulnerabilities in these. And because they're so widespread across enterprise organizations, this is a problem, because then you have rapid compromise indirectly through third parties. One of the most recent ones was the Clop ransomware group, about 2023, I'll say where 2022, 2023. And there were hundreds of organizations who were caught up in this. Once we saw from previous file transfer applications being exploited through the vulnerability, and then having to check to see, are we exposed? Or who do we know that's exposed? We were able to build a system, a process, engage the right people faster and better at the right time. Really important. With the amount of compromise that occurred through that, and again, it was significant. Knowing what we were looking at and knowing what to do enabled the organization to be able to now have that in place for the next one, and to know how this can happen. Be on the lookout anytime you hear the words managed file transfer and vulnerability. And this was a tremendous learning experience, understanding also more about how quickly and how ransomware groups operate to be able to leverage this kind of an attack and where they dig into. there's just been successively better technical reporting and anatomies of attack done on this. So you can go to your threat hunting teams and say, this is what we've got. Can you go look now in our systems? What are you going to find? And that's really important. Do you know what to go look for? Do you know how your systems are laid out, where your crown jewel assets are? And this gives you the opportunity as an organization to find your gaps. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We all make mistakes. We all have gaps. If the important thing is, once you found them, what did you do about it? And are you ready for the next thing? If you harden your security successfully like that, you're just gonna be better. You're not going to be as likely to be compromised, is the simplest way of putting it. But really, you do not want to have to undergo that kind of an exercise. People working, literally setting up war rooms, working 24/7.
So I want to pick on that just a little bit, because sometimes, even when you know that there's something bad happening and you get the information about that, right? It's not always easy for an organization to be preventative or proactive about taking measures or ensuring that they are safe, right? Do you have any, key ingredients for success in order to be able to make that, more of a reality for organizations? So, for example, an executive understanding of risk might be a key ingredient. Risk with respect to, these types of threats. What sorts of, key ingredients can help, set an organization or a series of organizations up for success?
Okay, first off, successful security implementation is led from the top down. It's a buy-in from your very top so that their awareness of it, their willingness to continue to learn and receive the information, critical. And then to be able to support the resources and the funding it's going to take to put in place those detection systems, the right people, the right time, the ability to communicate and remove a lot of silos that are in place. Collaboration is the best thing we have. And being able to bring people across all those different departments, people who may have no idea, what security necessarily means to them. They're operating in their happy place. They're building something. They don't realize that their access to GitHub or what they're putting into the code at this point could actually be lifted and abused, and helping them understand this. So you need to have the security people talking with all of the other people in the organization and having a conduit straight up to the top when the proverbial hits the fan.
Great.
So this has been improving. People understand from and on paper, any CISS people will tell you risk, okay, security driven from the top down. It's, the responsibility is delegated, but they are ultimately responsible. They own it at the top. And we can't do this without that full-on awareness, understanding, and support, and being able to involve your C-suite and your top level people to have governance working along with them, and then carrying out the instructions and making it that security is not the department of no. So we have people within the organization, if we're not the ones to do it directly ourselves, to partner with the people who are really good at communicating and doing knowledge and internal training, so that everybody is part of the solution.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Cheryl. So let's have a look now at where the digital meets the physical and how that landscape is evolving. You've been focused on OT and ICS, areas where cyber threats kind of really hit critical infrastructure, for example. What excites you about this area, and what are you worried about in this area?
Oh, okay. So I know that by working in financial, I am in a critical infrastructure area, but my fascination is with when the lights go off. And I think about what happened in Ukraine in 2015 and 2016. And And
Oh, another thing.
oh my stars. You want I have always been fascinated by
Yes.
Russia and the Russian state-sponsored groups. That's that's an incredible story of building this up over time and having the capability and the intent and the subterfuge to be able to carry out like the espionage and then creating something sophisticated enough that you can cause major problems. So yes, in Destroyer, when we're out, when we are disabled, we do not have power, we really start to panic. We're okay for a few hours, but at certain points, especially in the winter when we are exposed to greater risks through cold, or the summer and it is terribly hot, or we don't have water. Even a short water shutdown and you have to bring in bottled water, we react to that psychologically. And this is important because in Canada, you may remember the Rogers outage.
Yeah.
And for that day, we didn't understand initially what the heck was going on and why couldn't we contact people? We couldn't access the news reports. There's not as many printed newspapers to get that information right away. People didn't know, and when you don't know, you get afraid. And when you can't reach people, you get afraid. When you can't access your money at your bank, you go worse than afraid. I just insert picture of the run on the bank from It's a Wonderful Life. And that kind of panic is what a nation state adversary is going to leverage to the hilt, because that's societal breakdown. And that for me is the heart of what defending OT, ICS systems, critical infrastructure is about. Securing our power grids, our water supplies, our hospitals and healthcare services, the things of life. And as we know, we are super reliant on technology. So telecom, the communications network that is digital, and how that is connected to our online banking and money. Without money and power, without communications and power, we feel dead in the water. And the capabilities are there to do some massive destruction.
Yes. Thank you. And then in terms of how this is evolving and what you see in the future, are there any concerns that you would share? Any particular concerns?
Yes, that I'll pick up from, you may not, if you don't know her, Leslie Carhart is just an incredible human and a champion of the OT ICS critical infrastructure network. She works with Tragos. Again, when I grow up, I want to be a defender just like them. And Leslie has called out the great need for bringing up the next generation. How can we grow the talent? How can we bring the people here to work in this? Because as it is, it doesn't look as sexy as gaming and IT, but it is ever so crucial. So we need to help encourage people to come in. You have to get dirty. You have to wear hard hats. You have to do the work in the factories. And it is dangerous. It can be very dangerous. Yet we need to have more people than ever coming in and growing the people who can take over the knowledge from the people who are leaving this sector, because we don't get to stay around forever. And there's new technology constantly evolving. And what was once air gapped, once left on its own because it didn't talk to the outside world, everything connects. And having people who really appreciate that, as well as understanding that there are big, important differences between operational technology, OT, and information technology, IT. This does not run the same as this. There are different priorities and different protocols. And you actually did a recent podcast that was super about this, about zero trust in critical infrastructure. And you laid out a lot of really key points.
Well, thank you.
So anybody wants to learn more, this was a great way to get a good foothold on what we need to be looking at now and why, given the ability to connect so many things. And we can't and we aren't able to properly monitor everything. And asset inventories, hard enough in IT, even harder in OT.
You know, I would say that it is kind of a sexy thing in some ways. I know you say it's not sexy. I kind of think it is. It's so real, and I guess that's why. And I love the way that you painted the picture, you know, for us of the psychological impact of, you know, just being without power for a few hours, and you know, every once in a while, like the power goes out and reminds you what it's like, right? But it's you know, it's important to connect those dots between, you know, that real impact of, you know, what if the water supply has, you know, a problem and people are drinking it. Like these are very, very real, you know, impacts. And there are, you know, a lot of challenges just based on, I mean, everyone has, you know, there's a lot of legacy infrastructure across a lot of different, you know, industries, but, you know, where it's here, it's got particular nuances, and you know the equipment that you're using has so many nuances to it, you know, as well. You know, I was really interested when I first started doing that research in terms of the differences between, you know, IT and OT, and it's a fascinating area to me. And as I had mentioned in my talk, kind of, you know, realizing that some of those things I learned in electrical engineering were actually, you know, were actually kind of good to know. I think it's new for a lot of people to understand like that our systems are so vulnerable, and it's not that the people who work there aren't great people and who aren't doing their best with what they've got. It's just a really interesting area with its own particular characteristics.
It's a culture. And I have to credit a good friend of mine, Chris Sistrunk. So he's been with Mandy and he has talked about he's the power grid person. He understands the threats and remediation and has given many talks about network monitoring and how it's different when you are working with people in OT and the concept of run to failure, because you don't touch things until they are dead. Otherwise, you'll brick them and you won't necessarily have a replacement. So you kind of have to leave it alone and help it continue doing it until you have a better solution. And you're working with people who are out in the field, they're gruff. I started out with CP Rail. We used to take calls, I was in the help desk. We used to take calls from the rail yard workers. And you want to talk about gruff? So awful things would happen to IBM keyboards on a regular basis. And these guys had literally chucked them out the window. So,
like physically, like they're gone.
That's great sounding. And the very first thing that they taught us was, how long does it take to stop a train? And that kind of puts you right there. You have tons and tons of metal going down that track. It's not going to stop in 40 feet. It's not going to stop in 100 feet. You need to build in enough time and provisions to ensure that when that train has to come to a stop, it's going to have the room it needs and there's not going to be death.
And yes, and no one is stopping it, you know, that you don't want to stop it either. I think I got, you know, some chills there. How long does it take to stop a train? I love that. Thank you. In terms of geopolitical or nation state trends, you know, is there anything that leaders should be paying attention to, you know, right now?
Definitely. The wake-up calls from Salt and Volt Typhoon, understanding how deeply buried in our networks Chinese threat actors are and their capabilities. This is crucial. Understanding from a legacy of breaches dating back to OPM even, all of that information and those data points obtained, what can they build with that? And where can they take that to? So how do we prepare for the eventuality of bigger compromise and what we know, reading reading the room, reading the signs. What are people angling toward? We are in such a volatile world right now. And we have known that China and the Taiwan situation, because China wants Taiwan, China wants control over Taiwan. They have planned out and looked at a go-to-war scenario. There's a podcast Nicole Perlroth, I think, put together, really, really compelling about that. And how over time China bought the world, bought their ownership, bought their ways in, created this control through compromise and acquisition of key data so that they would be able to make the next move. And they're so far down the line, we don't see it coming. Looking at the relationships between the big four, as I call them, as a lot of people call them, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, understanding how they work differently, but also understanding that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and how they work together. And right now there's a lot of very, very important interplay, particularly between China, Russia, and a group of nations beneath them who have that capability, the structuring of mutually beneficial partnerships with India, with Brazil, etc. And looking at this through the lens of they have been working to build a new world order for some time. The difference stands out. Cyber criminals, it's about greed. It's always about greed. State-sponsored actors, it's always about control and serving at the behest of your master. There's an interesting gray area where cybercrime services the needs of the state and those state-sponsored actors. And so don't write it off. If somebody comes to you with a theory and they don't have all of the hard evidence, look at it, talk about it, map it out, because you have time at that point. Look for the context and reach back into the past to see where has this happened before. What are their past behaviors, so that you can actually say they are likely to do this and build off of that. It's going to be really important.
And then how do I translate that to something that is actionable for me as an organization, I guess?
If you are, I look at when the Ukraine war broke out, we had our strategic geopolitical team within threat intelligence, gathering all the information, working from a historical understanding of the types of attacks these threat actors did and what the motivations were, to then lay out the likelihood of the type of activities they could resort to. What was the likelihood of a cyber attack? What would that cyber attack look like? Would it be disruptive? Would it be focused against critical infrastructure? Would it be hitting financial institutions? And we needed to also expand on what would this create in addition to the immediate threat. As the impacts percolated, we've seen time and again where cyber criminals use to their advantage disasters, the phishing, the fraud that builds off of that. But if you can also look back to the 2016 elections, and we realized misinformation, disinformation campaigns, which have escalated over the years. These are a very powerful weapon, and now compounded by AI. We have to take, the playbook has really moved and advanced. We have to evolve with it faster than we may be comfortable with, but we have to understand that what we knew then and what worked then is not applicable to the types of threats we're facing now and the capabilities of these threat actors, elevated by AI, aggravated by more unknowns that we've had to deal with that become encumbrances. Unfortunately, natural disasters. There are different things that are applicable here. So that would be one of the big concerns. We shift into here.
And so when we start looking at, the likelihood, I mean, does the likelihood also kind of go down based on something? So if I'm looking at, a number of risks and the likelihood just kind of seems to be up like across the board, right? Then you still need to prioritize, right? So I'm assuming that there's a relative kind of, priority that you can focus on based on the intelligence that you have. In order to figure out what to do.
So the project always starts with death, life and death, safety. So depending on where you are, yes, if you're in critical infrastructure, that is your top priority. If you're in IT, it's data. You are responsible for that data and what can be taken or done with it. We are really watching the ability for, so identity and access management, critical right now. And when somebody gets to take over your account, as we have watched with Scattered Spider and the crews behind that and how they have grown since, I think, 2018 with a group of script kiddies known as Lapsus, and then the Okta event, and how they accessed numerous companies through that, which taught us all very, very important lessons about third-party compromise through those digital supply chains.
There's a lot of scenarios to look at potentially. Most organizations to be familiar with, tabletop exercises, hopefully at this point in time. Do you have any examples of, a cross-team kind of collaboration? Because ideally, I mean, we've talked about this idea of having everyone involved and everyone kind of understanding their role to play and their impact on the situation. Have you seen an example where, it revealed, gaps that an organization didn't realize they had, and maybe they picked the right scenario? Or maybe they picked a scenario that they thought was really off base, but it turned out that that it revealed some important gaps for them. Yeah.
Oh, I love them. I have been so happy to be able to be part of constructing them. A great example was when we did one for an insurance company. Terrific people, really keen to do this well and do this right. Both of us, both sides took away. It's a fantastic learning opportunity for everybody involved. It was a ransomware simulation, and we had filmed a news crew to guide us through the time points. And the takeaways were you need to have the right people involved at the right times. You need to have crisis communication established and driven by policy through procedure from the top down, so you can control that narrative as well as all of the people involved. You need to be able to access your legal department to know the answers to the questions right away. Your engineering, your everybody, essentially pretty much everybody from your departments, but you're knowing who your key departments are, having a hot site or something that you can spin up where you have actually tested those backups in advance so that you can plug in and go and there's no unexpected surprises. Or God forbid, they were able to access the backups and they are not there or they are tampered with, because integrity really is crucial. And one of the best important lessons is you're not yourself on a really terrible, horrible, awful, bad day. You are not going to be thinking logically or coherently when you are in the middle of something and caught off guard. So being prepared for that and then being able to help others. You don't want to be a problem for others. You want to be able to assist as needed. And knowing that you may not be able to reach your key people. So what do you have instead of? So that you have something in your playbook, your action plan. Those were takeaways. They were really
And so
ones.
that organization, did they feel like they had a plan in place and the communications and everything, they thought that they were good, but then, through the tabletop exercise, they were able to understand, where their gaps were. And these were all kind of gaps.
They were well prepared beforehand. They had all of the right pieces there. It was a great chance to discover the gaps, what they thought was enough, and then discovering, okay, this is not going according to plan. Oh shit, and the oh crap, we should have had this. We didn't think it was going to do this. Great learning. That's why tabletops are really good. They show, even if you are doing all of the right things, and you probably are, it shows you those gaps.
But
that
at
you
least
can
you
improve.
know, right? At least you know where they are,
Absolutely.
and you can, once you make something visible, then it makes it a lot easier to take action on that. It's always great too when I've
Yeah.
seen a tabletop exercise where, with the C-suite, for instance, and like they discover so much. Like once you get over kind of the well, I should know everything, and you don't, and it's okay not to know everything, and to ask questions about that. Just the value they see in it, and when they ask, we should have everybody involved in
Yeah.
something like this, and ask for it to be kind of repeated or trickled down to other parts of the organization.
Yeah.
It's really terrific to see, and it's one of those why haven't we been doing this all along kind of things, ideally, right?
There was such a willingness from them to take this. They wanted to learn what they could do better, and they were open and receptive to working with that information. So big kudos to
Amazing.
them.
So let's turn to building resilient communities. Okay, so I'd like to talk about your role as a bridge builder. So what do you think of when you think of yourself as a bridge builder, and what does that look like, practically speaking?
It's me being able to bring two people together, quite
Mm-hmm.
literally, to introduce one group with one set of ideas to something else over here, to people over here, and just connecting people at that people level, and seeing them like, oh, hey, hi, this thing, and then watching them run with that ball. That is it is the most rewarding feeling. And it's the ability to help people talk to each other. Sometimes it's a little more challenging because there's friction between these groups, but then for me, it's because I'm really nice.
You do seem very, very nice.
I try to use that. It's good for bridge building.
It's good for all kinds of things. What is the need that you see? Mm-hmm.
Collaboration to take down silos that you may not even be aware of, to move past, this is how we do it, or we do it this way because we have to. Understanding that you need to be able to adapt and change with a more rapidly changing threat landscape, and be open to somebody else's ideas. The solution may not be yours, it may not be in front of you, and you have to put that need for control or that pride aside and make room for something good.
We talked about at the beginning how you're a founding member of the Diana Initiative. Tell us a little bit more about that, and why it started.
Oh, my first DEF CON, and I'm sitting in the food court at Bally's with new people I've met, women that I have met, and I'm like blown away by them because it was so cool to be there. And they're talking about their experiences. There are 30,000, mostly guys, walking around in black t-shirts. There's a lot of testosterone.
They're all black
And
t-shirts. They're I agree. Yes.
and there's a lot of, unfortunately, bad behavior. And I was hearing stories of just how bad the behavior was, to the point that it's abusive and harmful, and that it is muzzling these people that I'm with, women with great ideas, strong, capable people who can make the difference, and feeling like they have to fight 3 times as hard to get heard in their workplaces, or having to just fend off guys who are being rude, is an understatement at times, but yeah, who just feel entitled and empowered to be there and behave the way they want to, and that we are lucky to be there or maybe shouldn't be there. I'd been fortunate up to that point to really not have to have encountered that level of behavior, but I was aware of it, and we were talking how fun and how comfortable we all were together. And wouldn't it be great if we had a space here in the middle of all of this where we could just be ourselves and talk about anything we like? Because there was talking about their kids, they were showing off their nails, they were talking about, hey, this, this place, we should go to this, all of this, and as in the midst of hacking and things that they learned about. And so the concept was born of, what if we could have a really comfortable, safe place, an oasis for women attending this event, these events in this week, to come to and relax and share without worrying. And we would make it welcoming to everybody, because we want allies. We want the guys who see the need for this too, who are our supporters, who are, willing to be there along with us and do these things because they enjoy it too. So it rose out of that, and we had an event in a space with that was provided through one of the DEF CON groups. They had a suite, and they welcomed us in, and it was small and mighty, and people gave talks from the heart, powerful talks. And we sat there and we drank it in, and it was thrilling. And that grew to the next year and the next year. We just didn't have the space for the demand because fire rules were, we had to turn people away because the limit in the room was under 200, and we had like 100 people massing in the hallways. But that told us what we were doing was right. And we were offering the chance to learn, solder, resume, give a talk, and be welcomed and received for it. And bringing in young women who were in college, teaching people, you can do this, you should do this, you belong here. And then having people return a year or two later saying, you changed my life. I'm doing this. When it moved to the Westin Hotel, and we had like the entire floor, and it was just our space, to see women fling themselves at each other in hugs because they knew each other, and they were coming back and they were reuniting. They were just like grabbing
It's like
space
summer camp.
together, sitting down.
Very nice.
That's everything. That is everything.
Great. And thank you for that. And do you see that, has that need changed at all over the years? Is it still the same kind of need? Is it grown? Is it shrunk?
It has grown because we realize there's other underrepresented voices. And for us, the trans community, very much so. So we early on had trans members and welcomed them into the group, and have, especially this past year, seen the need to be there for the people who are worried, are uncomfortable, need a place to call their own.
Yes, diversity certainly can mean a lot of different things, including neurodiversity, gender diversity,
Absolutely.
all kinds of things. What role would you say that
Absolutely.
diversity plays in terms of defending against threats?
It lets us draw a much bigger circle. We can take in a fuller scope of things. We need people who think outside the box, beyond think outside the box, to see things in ways our mind isn't wired to do so. And there's a tremendous number of neurodivergent people within the security community for this reason. And me too. So, and it is so validating and so fun and wonderful to be with people that are like you. And you can have this excitement and this comfort of sharing ideas and not feeling like you have to restrain it, but you're able to put it out there and do wonderful things with information and understanding, and unleash the power and the potential of that capability. We won't see the things that we're not looking for, but we can invite the people who do. get a much bigger picture we can work from. And the opportunity, the ideas that we would not have arrived at.
I'm going to ask you, because you're an expert in your field, I'm going to ask you the water cooler question, which is, if all the threat intelligence experts were, standing around the water cooler exchanging information, what would they be talking about at this point in time?
Oh, God. Very likely the most recent breaches. So the sales loft drift breach, for example, which it's got a huge blast radius, I would say, and just having to stay on top of it because it is a supply chain third-party compromise, being aware of that and tracking that, and as well as there's a couple major vulnerabilities again that are out there, our network devices that are just coming back over, and the challenges of identifying and updating those within a regulated patching cycle in enterprise environments. There was, for those in GitHub, who work with GitHub or NPM, for example, there was a major event with NPM and about 2 billion downloads of the packages. But thankfully, it was caught and the person behind it really didn't get anything. They weren't able to take anything. But it's important to, again, the number of NPM breaches over time, understanding that that is a real vulnerability, and the securing the CI/CD pipeline for software development, understanding software security lifecycle in the development process. So I'd say that it's those top things. This week's bleeping computer hits, as it is, and mixed in with some of the current geopolitical fracas.
And then is the AI attack surface kind of on that list, as well?
Oh, I didn't bring that up. It is such a hot button. There are people from threat intelligence. They are, if they feel they are with with like-minded friends, they're going to probably be talking about AI attacks and Claude and ChatGPT and being able to send out those malicious prompts. But how many of these have been reported now? Okay, so where is this likely to head, and doing some worst case scenario and going, but shit, we use it in the organization. And how are we going to influence people to really be cautious with it, because the guardrails aren't in place. So I'm with the people who are like, the guardrails aren't in place, and this is really bad, and we are seeing the reports of, I asked it to do this and it went and did this, and I asked it to do this and it deleted this whole database, and we are going, that is my water cooler type of conversation.
Absolutely. And then if I was to go to the other end of the range here and look at students and the next generation, we had talked about that need for people to be that strong next generation to help with defense. You've run simulations, I think, with students across Canada. What do you know about this next generation, and what are you hoping for, I guess?
Oh, this next generation has something that we didn't get to have. They are so aware of social justice. They understand and value diversity and acceptance and inclusion at a level that we need and definitely need to support and have. This just is who they are. That's going to enable collaboration, and they grew up with video games and they play together online. When you play with people, you have another level of trust and communication, which again empowers you to do some great things and work powerfully as a team. These are things they can bring into the fold. The problem right now is we're seeing that critical thinking isn't being taught. They're not developing that skill the way we had to develop that skill. A lot of technology is making it easier for them to just get the answers rather than find the way to get the answers. And we need them to have that ability to be able to look at the information and not trust it, to not trust social media or not share as much on social media as they are. But I feel that they are in a world that is not of their making. They're very frustrated by it. They see fewer opportunities. They see the adults that they are told to trust not telling them the truth about how bad the situation actually is, and then having to run up against that wall themselves and see they don't have those opportunities that the past generation did, and it's going to be so much harder. And that really is a disincentive. It's harder to reach them. But we have to make the effort to do that.
I do. And thank you for helping to pave the way. And I look forward to seeing, what else you're coming up with as well, and in other ways that you can help empower the community. Any last words or a story maybe about the importance of community in this field? I mean, we've talked around it a bit, but maybe just to help people understand, really how important it is to have, a resilient community, and how that feeds the resilience of society as a whole for us.
Oh, I love that. Something called the Franklin Project was brought out this year, and that is about teaching communities how to use their own people, their own resources to build that resilience when disaster strikes. We've just been through years of successive fires, floods. We can't use the word unprecedented anymore because it's lost its meaning. Once in 100-year storms are happening more than once a decade even. And the level of devastation and loss, it's so hard for anybody to go through, to watch, and then we can't help all the people we want to help as we watch it continue to unfold. But we can teach people how to provide for themselves when this happens again. And a friend of mine, so Josh Corman and Bo Woods are key people involved in I Am the Cavalry and that is a group that came together some years ago, and it takes a prominent role at various conferences besides Las Vegas, for example. It was at ShmooCon and other places. And they talk about how we need to understand critical infrastructure, who's responsible, the policy making that has to be in there to really enable us to do the things that need to be done now and put it in place. And this is where getting community involvement at the local municipal, small towns. I'm in a small town of 4,000 people, helping people who've never thought about it happening to them, getting together those resources and that understanding for the day that it does. We can work together at the level of community to provide for our needs in advance and to build something so much stronger, because nobody is an island. We need to be in this together.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Cheryl. I love that the connecting of the dots between sort of policy and awareness and kind of that bottom up kind of resilience, of the community, that is so critical in the end, to empower that and to have that strength. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show today, Cheryl. I would love to chat again sometime. And I thank you for watching Wired for Change. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd encourage you to subscribe and listen in on conversations about change and how you can play a role in making that change happen as well. So thanks again. And that's another episode of Wired for Change.